Hi everyone, I'm Gordon from Camera Labs, and this is the Lumix GH5S, a high-end mirrorless camera aimed at pro videographers. Now the GH5S doesn't replace the GH5, it joins the existing GH5 and G9 as joint flagships, but each with a different speciality. The G9 is the ultimate stills camera, the GH5 the ultimate hybrid camera, and now the new GH5S becomes the ultimate video camera in the Lumix G range. The GH5S shares essentially the same weatherproof body as the GH5 with a high-resolution viewfinder, fully articulated touchscreen and twin UHS-2 card slots. It also shares the same accessories. The main physical differences are on the top, a red ring around the drive dial on the left to denote the flagship status, like the G9 had, and a new big red record button on the right. While the port selection remains the same as the previous GH5 though, the microphone input on the GH5S can now be switched to accept line level audio input. It's also possible to use the PC Sync port on the front of the camera to deliver timecode in and out to synchronize with multiple cameras, and Panasonic supplies a BNC cable with the camera. The GH5S features a brand new 10.2 megapixel sensor. Now that's half the total resolution of the G9 and GH5, but it means each of those individual pixels is larger and more sensitive in low light, and in fact the GH5S also has another cunning trick in low light that I'll describe later in the video. It also means that Cinema 4K footage can be captured with a clean 1:1 crop with no scaling and no field reduction, so there are benefits to a nice low resolution sensor when you're filming video. Now interestingly, unlike the G9 and GH5, the GH5S does not feature built-in sensor shift stabilization. There's a couple of reasons for this. First, the sensor itself is actually physically a little bit bigger and so wouldn't fit the mechanism of the GH5 body, but also because some videographers don't actually want built-in image stabilization. They want to manage it themselves with various rigs and gimbals, because in some very high vibration environments, for example, having built-in image stabilization is actually a disadvantage. Now I mentioned a moment ago that the sensor is a little bit bigger than a standard 4/3 sensor. That's because the GH5S features additional pixels on the left and right side of the standard 4:3 shape, and this allows it to record the wider 3:2 and 16:9 aspect ratios without losing too much detail and, crucially, without reducing the field of view. It's a trick last seen in this series on the Lumix GH2, and I've made a series of diagrams to explain how it works. Here's the theory. All lenses deliver an imaging circle within which the quality performs as expected. Most imaging circles are designed to exactly fit a rectangular sensor. Here's a traditional 4/3 sensor on the left and the new GH5S sensor on the right. You can see how the 4:3 shape of the traditional 4/3 sensor fits exactly within its imaging circle, while the slightly wider sensor of the GH5S means the extreme corners of the sensor actually poke slightly beyond the imaging circle, but don't worry, the GH5S doesn't use these extreme corner pixels. When shooting 4:3 shaped images, the traditional 4/3 sensor on the left uses its full area, maximised within the imaging circle. Meanwhile, the GH5S sensor on the right crops strips from the left and right sides, leaving it with the same area and shape. So no benefit there when shooting 4:3. When shooting in the wider 3:2 shape on traditional 4/3 sensors though, the 4:3 image is simply cropped vertically in order to deliver the required shape. This inevitably loses resolution and also reduces the field of view. In contrast, the GH5S sensor on the right is wide enough to accommodate a larger 3:2 shape than the one on the left, and it doesn't reduce the field of view either. Switch both sensors to 16:9, the shape used for UHD or 1080p video, and the difference in efficiency becomes even more apparent. The traditional 4/3 sensor on the left crops the frame even more, losing even more resolution and detail and further reducing the field of view. Meanwhile, the GH5S sensor on the right exploits the spare pixels on the sides to accommodate a 16:9 shape that again is larger and still doesn't reduce the field of view. You'll notice there's still a few spare pixels available on the sides of the 16:9 image. These allow the GH5S to capture the slightly wider 17:9 aspect ratio of Cinema 4K and also do it with a clean 1:1 crop as seen above left in yellow. Meanwhile, while shooting in the square 1:1 shape on the GH5S, the camera takes a crop than 4:3 image as normal. This may not exploit the full potential of the imaging circle, but doing so would have required a much taller sensor with a lot of wasted area in the other shapes. Okay, that's the theory. Now for the practice. As I cycle through the different photo aspect ratios on the GH5S, notice how the wider ones, 3:2 and 16:9, are genuinely capturing more at the sides. They're not just being cropped from the same original image. This approach allows the GH5S to maximise its sensor area and not compromise the field of view when shooting or filming in different formats. The GH5S is also the first camera in the Lumix G series to feature dual native ISO. This is a technology first seen on the EVA1 and VariCam 35 Pro video cameras, and it's designed to allow very clean footage at high ISOs. Here's the theory. Now, on a traditional sensor, there is a base or a native ISO at which it performs at its best. On most stills cameras, this would be 100 or 200 ISO. As you increase the sensitivity, that signal is simply amplified, but unfortunately the noise is amplified with it, which is why at higher sensitivities you'll see increasing levels of noise and reduced quality. Dual native ISO employs not one but two analog circuits for every pixel. Now that's quite complicated and expensive to make, but it effectively allows two base or native sensitivities. In the case of the GH5S, the low base sensitivity is 400 ISO and high base sensitivity is 2500 ISO. This means when it's set to 2500 ISO, the GH5S isn't actually using any gain, which in turn allows it to deliver much cleaner results than it would have done at 400 ISO with almost 3 stops of gain. Due to the way the GH5S implements the technology, and of course for having the bigger pixels in the first place, there's actually benefits over the GH5 from around 800 ISO upwards. An early footage that was shown from the camera looks very promising, even compared to Sony's full-frame A7S Mark II. In terms of quality, the GH5S can film 4K up to 60p, which now also includes the wider Cinema 4K format, which on the previous GH5 was only available up to 24p. Like the GH5, you can record 10-bit internally and also enjoy unlimited recording times. If you're into slow motion, there's also 1080 video up to 240p. A variable frame rate option provides access from 2 to 240 frames per second. Rates between 210 and 240 frames per second are cropped. Anamorphic filming is well supported using third-party lenses to squeeze a very wide frame into a 4:3 shape for recording at up to 400 megabits per second. The GH5S also offers a handy de-squeeze option, allowing you to more easily preview the effect as it will be viewed. You can see the de-squeezed image here during composition, complete with level meters and timecode running in the background. There's even more besides for pro videographers, including hybrid log gamma for HDR displays and the very flat Vlog profile included as standard. As you may recall, this was an optional upgrade for the GH5 that cost the best part of $100. And as a Panasonic camera, it of course features 4K photo modes, although misses out on the 6K options of the G9 and GH5 because the sensor doesn't have enough resolution to capture 18 megapixel images. However, the GH5S becomes the first camera in the Lumix G series to finally support 14-bit RAW files for stills. So like Sony's A7 series, Panasonic now offers multiple versions of its top camera aimed at different specialities. All shoot photos and video very well, but the G9 again excels on stills. The GH5 is the hybrid all-rounder, which leaves the latest GH5S to become the video specialist. That said, I do think some stills photographers will be intrigued by the multi-aspect ratio and clean high sensitivities of the GH5S, and I'll explore all of this in my next videos about the camera. In the meantime, for more information, please visit cameralabs.com, and if you find my videos useful here, please do subscribe. Thanks for watching, see you next time.